I thought I'd take a break from drawing today because I'm just gonna do a short stream while I'm waiting for my partner to get home from visiting her parents for the holidays. So I'm gonna just be reading some different journals that I've been meaning to read, and maybe reacting to some stuff or some ideas based on it. I've been very interested in some like protest literature and stuff like here. This is a book I've been reading that one of my professors got me as a gift. Um, and I thought I'd just read some journals that are kind of related to things like that. So I'm going to be reading Cubism, Futurism, Anarchism, and the Aesthetic of Action by Mark Antliff. I hope that's how you say his last name. I guess I'll just dictate part of it as I read along because I haven't read this yet. I just thought reading the abstract on it, it seemed a little interesting. So the question of how art and politics interrelate is a vexing one. This is particularly true when considering various attempts in pre-World War I France to forge a rapprochement between the aesthetic and the political. Perhaps the most understudied group to develop such a synthesis were the anarcho-individualists, artists and writers associated with the doctrine of I lost my place when I looked away. Sorry. Apparently I'm bad at reading. Anarcho-individualists, artists, and writers associated with the doctrine of artistocracy. Yeah, artistocracy. I keep getting distracted by flashing things on the YouTube Studio Analytics thing. Anyway, first propounded in 1906 by the anarcho-individualist Gerard de Lacaze Duther. Goodness, these old names. I'm never going to say a single one of them right. In his book, come on, old writing, L'Ideal Human de l'Art, joined by the artists and critics. Lacaze Duther succeeded in founding a number of literary avenues promoting the aristocracy or artocratic. One moment. I need to find out how to say this word because it's going to bother me. I'm definitely saying this word wrong.
Aristocratic.
Aristocratic?
Aristocratic.
Alright. I knew the word aristocratic. Apparently I don't know how to spell the word aristocratic. Okay, so aristocratic creed. The most significant of which was the journal L'Action d'Art, founded in 1913. Although L'Action d'Art appeared intermittently, ceasing publication after 1913, and only reappearing in 1919. The journal forged a link between anarchists and some of the most significant literary and artistic figures of the day, including neo-symbolists associated with verset prose, such as Paul Fort and Guillaume Apollinaire, the futurist Ugo Giannattasio and Gino Cervini. I am so sorry to any nationality whose names these come from, whom I'm butchering. The cubist Albert Glees and Alt Gerlato Murillo, later the leader of the Mexican muralist movement, the aristocrats' adaptation of the theories of the philosopher Henry Bergson. Their anarchist doctrine won them the support of Bergsonians. Apparently he had Bergsonians. People that stand Bergson. Within the neo-symbolist and futurist milieu. I don't know why I genuinely think that's a typo, because the word milieu is a thing, but I don't know the difference between putting an X at the end, so I'm going to check. Okay, as far as I can tell, that's genuinely a typo, so we're not going to look into it. There's just an X at the end by mistake. Thus, avant-garde aesthetic and aestheticized politics were conjured under the banner of aristocrat. This paper will examine the complex history behind the synthesis, the aristocratic association of avant-gardism, aestheticism, and anarchism. Charted here runs counter to standard histories of the era, for an alliance of this type is widely thought to have reached the zenith before 1900, when the neo-impressionists justified their aesthetic precepts on the basis of anarcho-communism. I like me some anarcho-communism. Of Peter Kropotkin, Elise Reculus, and Jean Grave. As Robin Roslack has demonstrated, the neo-impressionists drew parallels between the aesthetic harmony achieved through their contrast of complementary colors and the social harmony that would arise in society governed by Kropotkin, anarcho-communist doctrine of mutual aid. In paintings such as Camille Pissarro, Apple Pickers, let's look at that painting. Since they don't have a picture, I like it when they have this. Okay. So this is apple picking. It's interesting. It's almost like that early like pointillist style to it. Camille Pissarro, 1830 to 1903, impressionist artist. Yeah, very impressionist. It was over 10 years. Okay. Huh. Interesting. Are there other pieces to this, or? Okay, it's just other things. Alright. Where were we? With apple pickers? Yeah, apple pickers. 1888. Or Paul Sinak in the Times of Harmony. Okay, well, let's look at that one, too. I like this one. There's a nice color to it. It also has that that kind of like pointillist impressionist style. It is very vibrant. I like it a lot, actually. It also does kind of have that that social art or social realism style of showing, or I guess not social realism, but just that social aspect of social realism, showing like the separation of like the different classes of society engaging in different actions, possibly even some self-referential imagery there with a painter on the shore there. Oh, let's see. I didn't realize you could scroll down. My name is Maureen Young. I'm associate professor, chair of. Okay. It doesn't really actually talk about the piece. Okay. Harmony, okay. The aesthetic harmony encoded in the neo-impressionist techniques had counterpart in representation, meant to approximate an agrarian utopia. I can see that, because it is a very idyllic, like, depiction of simple farm society, composed of self-sufficient anarchist communes. That is the dream, though. Self-sufficient anarchist communes. It is commonly held that the I'm gonna have to figure out what that means because that seemed. This is always the struggle when reading these, is not knowing what half of the words mean. Because you're an uncultured American that doesn't know anything about other languages. Relating to or characteristics of the end of the century, especially the 19th century. Okay, so it's just it's a very specific milieu of the turn of the century. So fin de siècle, demise of anarcho-communism, signaled the death knell for any alliance between the avant-garde artists and anarchists. With the founding of the Syndicalist Confédération Générale du Travail in 1900, the Paris Socialistes, which I'm gonna assume is the Paris Socialist Group or something. I'm gonna make that wild guess. In 1905, theories of class consciousness and strike action came to dominate leftist discourse. Anarcho-syndicalists and social organization, argued John Hutton, rejected the notion of anarcho-communism, that the golden age would arrive through the natural evolution of society. Instead, change would only occur through concerted human action, arguing that forging a new class consciousness was the motor of revolution. The anarcho-syndicalists contested neo-impressionists' disavowal of class in the name of individual freedom. But more importantly, according to Hutton, anarcho-syndicalism opened up the possibility of a new source and patronage for art, as well as a new audience. The workers in their unions and local party organizations. As a result, the anarcho-communists and their modernist sympathizers reportedly lost much of their support amongst the working class after 1905. I could probably see that because we started just seeing kind of a concerted effort by capitalist organizations to kind of stamp out any anti-capitalist and pro-humans right organization that ever existed. Far from signaling the end of the alliance between anarchists and modernists, the decline of anarcho-communism and the rise of anarcho-syndicalism led modernists to embrace a third type of anarchism, namely the anarcho-individualism, promoted by groups like aristocrats based on the theories of Oscar Wilde, Max Stirner, and Nietzsche. Is that Friedrich Nietzsche? Or is that who that is? Yeah, Friedrich Nietzsche. Or Nietzsche. Yeah, okay. Again, I'm so stupid when it comes to being able to read foreign names. Anarcho-individualism took one of the forms, the armed violence of reprise, individual or metaphorical revolt against social conventions in favor of individual self-expression. I think individual self-expression is fine, but I support anarcho-communism, personally, because I think we need to never forget about how important social relation and community is, because like it's the key factor for why humans have been able to do anything they've been able to do. One person is never going to be able to do half of what two people working together will do. As the same, two people will never be able to do a quarter of what four people will be able to do. The ability to get things done and the efficiency exponentially rises the more people you have working together and in conjunction with each other. I don't really like this move towards individualism necessarily. I think it's important to keep your individualism, but also not have that individualism isolate or alienate you from society. Because I feel like that's one of the biggest evils of capitalism, is its isolation tendency. It took one of the forms, the armed violence of reprisal individual metaphorical revolt against social conventions in favor of individual self-expression. In the former instance, the anarcho-individualist adopted an illegalist posture and challenged society through symbolic acts of violence, such as Augusta Villain's famous bombing of the Chamber of Deputies in 1893. This is probably where the idea that all anarchism is just pure chaos came from, is the anarcho-individualism, because, like acts of violence, because I'm not discounting acts of violence. I think they have a tactical use in getting your government to capitulate to the needs of the people. However, senseless bombings probably don't do any good. A matter of fact, bombings in general, I think, just end up culminating in acts of terror and terrorism, which generally opens up governments' ability to take more rights away from individuals. So this is probably anti-help in the expressive need, or the expressive wants of the act. As we've seen in America, anytime there's any type of terror attack, we lose freedoms in the name of trying to prevent future terror attacks. So it's kind of like a bit of a dupe. Famous bombing of the Chamber of Deputies in 1893. In the latter case, individual protest was restricted to revolt against bourgeoisie norms, a stance that led to aestheticization of politics. I mean, I don't think there's ever not been an aestheticization of politics, wherein acts that departed from social norms were declared beautiful by virtue of their compatibility with personal desires. Indeed, reprise individual and aestheticized politics were frequently conjoined in the mind of anarcho-individualists. Hence, Laurent Taillied's famous justification of Vellin's bombing on the basis of the beauty of this gesture of individual affirmation. I think that is a hill you are destined to die on. Yeah, even if it's true, even if it's totally true that a bombing was 100% justified, I think you can never really win an argument like that. After the turn of the century, that synthesis was broached again, but this time the art of Pablo Picasso, whose aesthetic innovations were compared to Villien's propaganda par la fête by anarchist sympathizers, like André Salmon and Guillaume Apollinaire. Anarchism also inspired the Fauvist Marek oh my god, that's a mouthful of a name. The Fauvist Maurice Vlaminck. Vlaminck, who hoped to burn down the École des Beaux art with the cobalts and vermilions. Thus, the aestheticization of politics remained a key component of anarchist rhetoric, long after reprise individual had been abandoned as a viable mode of anarchist protest. The aestheticization of politics is a key component in most art. I think that's too simple in anarchist art. Or to say that anarchist art is only an aestheticization of politics. I think much like social art is also an aesthetic, like an aesthetic of the worker. Anarcho-individualism won over new recruits from neo-symbolist, futurist, and cubist movements. I think that's pretty a pretty good condemnation of anarcho-individualism that the futurists sided with it, because the futurists were straight up fascists. At least that's where the movement was born. Not all futurism was made in the doctrine of fascism, but it was fascist propaganda art by intention. Whether it successfully maintained that aesthetic or that that expression to others who viewed it is, I think, debatable. And the Cubist movement was kind of misunderstood. There was not a strong correlation in what a lot of Cubists did, besides Picasso, very directly drawing inspiration from African tribal masks and things like that. Why did aristocratic theory in particular appeal to modernists? In any part, its attraction stemmed from the aristocrats' aestheticization of politics and disavowal of the class-based precepts of anarcho-syndicalism. I mean, class is important if you're not an aristocrat, I guess. In part, it resided in the aristocrat's correlation of aesthetic innovation with an individualist revolt, a synthesis commonly deployed by critics in defense of modernist paintings. You see this even today. Things like PragerU attacking. Oh, not back to school. I just thought I'd do some independent reading. I'm just doing a little reading and reaction stuff. I'm just doing a short stream, so didn't want to sit down and get pulled into some art right away, so I thought I'd do some artistic reading and discussion. So I'm reading about the aesthetics of action in anarchist art. And generally just reacting to things. So I'm looking at like art that's mentioned in the piece here. Thus, while the aristocrats, like many monarchs, clearly saw themselves as an elite vanguard of radical consciousness. Yeah, that sounds pretentious, like aristocrats. The psychological rather than purely economic foundation of that radicalism meant that the aristocrats could recruit allies from artistic bohemia, as well as from working class. Oh, it's not a book, it's a short article. The title is Cubism, Futurism, Anarchism, the Aestheticism of the Action to Art Group, 1906 to 1920 by Mark Antliff. It's a short 20-page journal. Yeah, it's a short 20-page Oxford journal. Or no, this is an excerpt from a 120-page journal. This is 20 pages, so this is like an individual chapter. And I just thought it, when I read its abstract, I thought it would be interesting to look into. Concurrently, they define their enemy, the bourgeoisie, in psychological as well as economic terms. The bourgeoisie mentality was overly intellectualized. They charged the following Bergson, and this was a person, apparently he had a following. Let's look into who he was, because I actually don't know who Bergson was. Okay, Bergson was a French philosopher. In full, Henry Louis Bergson, born October 18th, 1859, Paris, France, died January. Okay. French philosopher, first who elaborated what came to be called the processes of philosophy, which rejected static values in favor of values of motion, change, and evolution. That doesn't tell me a whole lot. What does that really mean? The first result of change. Okay. So I guess he was progress over all else type philosophy. So he's trying to say that the aristocrats, I guess, are the reason innovation happens, and was thus in opposition to the innovative creativity of the aristocrats. Moreover, although the I always do this. Moreover, although the aristocrats rejected anarcho-communism, they nevertheless developed a theory of collectivity on the basis of a Bergsonian notion of intersubjectivity. These anarcho-individualists argued that notions of collectivity and individualism were not mutually exclusive. Nice clap. Were not mutually exclusive, a position that resulted in cooperative ventures such as the creation of the theater to action to art, the involvement of the Bergsonian futurists. I think it's very interesting that the aristocrats are connecting to futurists and futurism, as futurism was directly born of fascist Italy under Mussolini. It's quite literally a fascist doctrine that glorifies violence and war. or at least that was its individual intention. And that's hard to believe, especially when you have things like, let's see, futurist wiener dog. I can never remember the name of this thing, but, okay, dynamism of dog on leash. Yeah. This art style was born because fascists thought they needed a action-filled, like, way to depict war in art, because that's manly, and what all art should depict is like the masculinity of society. It definitely did not stay this, and this piece itself probably wasn't directly fascist, but the movement in general started with fascist intentions. Severny and Gianastio in the theater project in turn testifies to its historical importance. However, there were aristocrats who were prepared to challenge the modernists on economic and political grounds. For anarchists like Alt and Lucas Duther, the Cubists and Futurists' involvement in commercial galleries behind. I'm gonna have to look up that piece. Alright, Bill Sellers. Song was modified and adopted. Oh, so this song is an anti-fascist song meant to protest against the fascist regime, I believe. The song was modified and adopted as an anthem of the anti-fascist resistance by Italian partisans between 1943 and 1945 during the Italian resistance. The resistance of Italy partisans against the Nazi German forces occupying Italy, and during the Italian Civil War, the Italian partisan struggle against fascist Italian Social Republic and Nazi German allies. I wouldn't get like strict in if I listened to a song that is almost 100 years old, would I? We're gonna risk it. We're gonna risk it because that's any song that is anti-fascist sounds pretty dope. Belle ciao. Thank you. I am absolutely horrible at pronouncing anything foreign because I speak only English because I'm awful. So I very much appreciate it, and I never actually want to intentionally mispronounce these things. Bella ciao. Bella ciao. I assumed. Ooh, it's already catchy. Oof. Man, I gotta say, like, every other nation's anthems always kick America's anthem's ass. Oh, there's a protest one? I would love to see a crowd of people sing this. Is this it? I love the energy of people doing stuff like that. That very much fits into the aesthetic of protest. Actually, good suggestion, because that very much the aesthetic of protest and stuff like that. It's a good song too, very catchy. Oh, it was actually a German song? Oh, yeah, apparently a bunch of people were singing it, were singing it, all over. The Sardine movement. Salvini is currently campaigning in Emilia-Romagna, an industrial region in northern Italy that has traditionally been a left-wing bastion. It is currently ruled by a central-left Democratic Party and goes to polls in January next year. Salvini far-right League Party, which, according to various polls, enjoys considerable popularity throughout Italy, has vowed to defeat the left in Emilia-Romagna. A protest against Salvini party drew an estimated 15,000 people in Bologna. I have to assume I didn't say that right. Yeah, I mean, it even has, like, death draws near in the anthem lyrics, so, yeah, it's kind of a dark song, but it seems like it was born from kind of a dark period, so it makes sense. And generally, you have to get kind of serious when you're talking about resisting, like, fascism and authoritarianism like that. And currently in our modern era, we see a resurgence of fascism across the whole world, and I encourage people to, like, rise up and resist. Alright, galleries and state-sanctioned salons. Salons, if no one knows, were like a French type of gallery. Was proof of falseness of their aesthetic convictions. Their opinions differed markedly from that of André Colmar, an aristocrat who found the Bergsonian aesthetic of the Cubist and Futurist compatible with the aristocratic theory. Giannatatio, or Giannatasio, and Cervini were well aware of such scrutiny. How they respond to this aristocratic debate is worth examining to properly understand that debate. We must begin studying the aestheticide critique of capitalism developed by the movement founded by Gerard de Lecuz de Uther. That's, I think, where this is going to get good. This dimension of action de l'art politics permitted a series of articles written by Larquez d'Uther in L'Art Aristocrat and related articles in L'Action d'Art. Larquez d'Uther distinguished between the mediocrity and parliamentary democracy and their I had no idea that the "Keep Calm and Carry On" came from World War. Would you say World War II? I had no idea. That's very interesting. "Keep Calm and Carry On" was a motivational poster produced by British government in 1939. Wow! I had no idea. It was intended to raise the morale of the British public, threatened with widely predicted mass air attacks on major cities. Although 2.45 million copies were printed, and the Blitz did in fact take place, the poster was only rarely publicly displayed and was little known until a copy was rediscovered in the year 2000. Huh. That's cool. Thanks for that little bit of information, Paul. That is very interesting. I always thought that it, like, or I don't know, for some reason I thought it came from, like, Doctor Who or something. Because I saw it, like, appear, in tandem with, like, Doctor Who stickers and stuff. I had no idea that it had an actual historical origin. Between the mediocrity of parliamentary democracy and the aristocrat of anarcho-individualism, the democratic system had an aesthetic analog in the ugliness of acts motivated by political or economic gain, as opposed to those acts that were the product of one's need to express oneself in an individual and thus beautiful manner. I mean, I think it more speaks to how our modern history is mirroring the dark history of the past, because we kind of are, if we do not, like, we're kind of like in the midst of repeating history. We have, like, the UK going isolationist, with, like, Brexit and stuff. We have America under Trump, who was heavily isolated, and we have just, like, various authoritarian leaders seizing power all over the world. Like in South America and Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro is devastating the wildlife, hurting citizens by denying, like, the existence of COVID, or, like, the danger of COVID to this day. We kind of see this pattern of a rise in fascism, I think. So I think the use of using a motivational poster like that is more reflective of the zeitgeist of the time, being somewhat reflective of the zeitgeist of the 1940s, because we're having such a resurgence of authoritarian ideals being expressed. It is disheartening, though, that so many things like that are re-arising. I really wish America had the same protest spirit that most of Europe does, though, because we see constant, like, big protests out of Europe that are really effective, especially places like France uh, and even the Middle East has been having, like, some really powerful protests. The American protests are no exception. It's just, unfortunately, our government likes to characterize the protests in America as violent acts. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's just like a lot of the problems we have today in America were literally, like, warned by from founding fathers, and yet we have a huge institution of people creating issues in America for us that are saying that the founding fathers essentially said the opposite, um, and aggrandizing capitalism for their own self-interest. I mean, unfortunately, I think a lot of these things are going to get really bad if nations' populaces do not manage to force their governments to capitulate to the needs of the people and more so the earth. Because we have a lot of fears of things like this on the precipice. The isolationism also really hurts because that a lot of nations that are undergoing these kind of uprisings of fascist ideals that are also leading to isolationist practices. It's also dangerous because China is very expansionist in kind of a subversive way, and with the isolation of many major powers across the planet, it has allowed China to kind of freely extend their arms of influence across the world in the last like 4 years to an alarming extent. Like they own pretty much the entire west coast of of African trading ports because of various loan practices they have partaken with African countries. Which is also partly why I've been very interested in reading things like protest literature and how art and aesthetic relates to that of protest and direct action. Okay, there are aristocrats of individualism, the democratic system, and aesthetic analog, and the ugliness of acts motivated by political or economic gain, as opposed to those acts that were products of one's need to express oneself in an individual and thus beautiful manner. Predictably, bourgeoisie culture, politics, and social conventions are deemed ugly, while acts of revolt against mercantile bases of such culture are labeled artistic. I mean, the bourgeoisie is kind of ugly. It's kind of inherently ugly. In our epoch of ugliness and decadence, Lacazes laments the public focus on the noise of politicians, on the pettiness of egotism. Oh my goodness, like this is literally so old and we see all this now. For me, it's like it's 240, 250 almost. Is dinner time in what is dinner time in Paris? I respect the shit out of Paris and or of France in general and how they've been able to continually hold their government accountable. You're all an inspiration to the world for protest. I think this line here about the ego to yeah where did I lose myself? Noise of politicians, yeah. Focus on the noise of politicians, on the pettiness and egotism or egoism. That is so true for like American politics now. So many things are these like gestures that these like empty gestures that don't change anything for people. They don't do anything, but they're these gestures for change and rebellion. And how all these things get tied up inside the ego of these politicians over what they should be doing is focusing on actionable change and actionable help for individuals. Like we see this on like literally both parties in America. I can. Oh, there's been mass shootings in Paris. I didn't even know. I know that the last thing I heard out of France in general was the protests sparked by the law to make it illegal to film police officers, which that is so authoritarian and good on all of you for stopping that. Like, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine making it illegal to film police officers. That is straight authoritarian. But we never see anything like that. Like here in America, we're about to have something called the CISA Act, or the stands for what does it stand for? It stands for like stop sexual exploitation or something. Oh yeah, the whole world has their governments in shambles though, and that's because there is there's become a change in, or the not a change, the parasitic and kind of like exploitive um, aspects of how the majority of our societies are running right now are are they've taken a toll on the average person for far too long, and now there is a very clear and obvious contention between most governments and their populace, as the actions of the governments as kind of profitable bodies of industry, which is how most governments operate, as like profit. They're essentially like a business, and we're all the employees in that business almost. That dichotomy is very harmful and exploitative, and that level of exploitation has caused a level of harm that is built up too much. And now I think most governments, peoples, are fighting against this system because it needs to change. It's too harmful for the individual, it's too harmful for the planet, and the whole idea I think America hasn't been livable since the 50s, and that's only because like the like capitalism is kind of exploitative, capitalism is kind of evil in its basis if you don't regulate the ever living hell out of it to stop all the evil components. And America is just the least regulated, like, or one of the least regulated capitalist systems. So we have some of the most exploitation. The only big positives about America, in my opinion, is our government is technically the richest government. So it could do anything at once, it just won't. But that almost makes things work, or worse. We technically have the best freedom of speech laws in the world. Um, so far. Um, but I don't know, like, it depends on how you quantify things being great or livable, but I think most of the world needs dramatic change. Um, and it's gotten to the point where people can't just run away from the problems anymore. Like, it's world spread. The idea that you could just, like, go somewhere where it's not a problem, I just think isn't true anymore. Because it's a problem everywhere. You can't run away from how our use of or our use of aiming towards profits and a supposed efficiency and innovation is destroying the planet. We can't ignore that anymore. Especially since we don't need it to. Like, I think the lockdowns across the world prove that we don't have to operate things at a level of profit efficiency for everyone to live, like, comfortably. We kind of dispelled the lie that all of society needs everyone to be constantly working, and all of society needs everyone to essentially, to some degree, be suffering so that the world can keep on going. No, we cut industry across the planet by incredible amounts for months on end at the start of the pandemic, and it had marketed improvements on the environment. I would say most people, excluding the feelings of isolation that some that had to spend time alone did, and the economic strife inflicted on those who do not live in areas with proper support structures like America. Excluding that, it revealed just how unimportant it is for us to constantly be in a state of production. that is the result of their desire for personal gain. Moreover, since they contribute nothing to the nobility or heroism of humanity, they try to identify themselves with such grandeur by becoming patrons of the arts. However, there are heroisms superior to all recompense, and since politicians like the bourgeoisie can only judge a work by its monetary value, they only reward artists who have succeeded on the arts market. That's I think we had a short conversation about galleries yesterday, and that line kind of ties back to galleries and how I was talking about there was this early clash between the ideas of art as a commodity and art as an expression. And in bourgeoisie eyes, like, art is only a term of, like, affluence and monetary value. They are unable to discern which works embody creative essence of a given era. That creative force is the gesture of those who are disinterested, the artists and thinkers who reject base or material motives, and therefore place no value on the material awards proffered by the state or the sale of paintings as at the salon. Yeah, I think this comes down to a very big core of the early, like, anti-commodification discussions around art. Is it not only creates kind of an overly aggressive barrier to entry to being an artist and being able to survive at some level. At least the internet has definitely mitigated that to an extent, because you can have things like Patreon, you can have print sales, you can have merchandise that's, like, pre-printed and stuff. But at the same time, you have to consider that while those aspects make it easier for an artist to be marketable without capitulating to the bourgeoisie class, you also have to consider that in the case of things like maybe creating artistic designs that are printed on a t-shirt or a hat, you are kind of creating an empty merchandization of that art, and that is producing waste and producing, like, pollutant and other byproducts of that success that are kind of hidden. I am pro-Marxism. Yeah, Marxism is good. It's just hard to read, and I think that's been a barrier in the modern era, and especially in places like America, where our government systematically demolishes the quality of our education to keep the populace like more and more undereducated, so that they can't understand more complicated forms of political theory and social structure. And that's actually a good dichotomy, because earlier in this article itself, it pointed out how the bourgeoisie were kind of the group that relied on a barrier of intellectual and complex theoretical ideas, and nowadays the bourgeoisie relies on almost a barbarish, or almost like a barbaric appeal to emotion and ideal over any type of intellectual thought whatsoever, and that's how the bourgeoisie perpetuates their systems of power. And it is interesting to think how that dichotomy has switched, that the working class movements of anarchism, Marxism, or any other type of communist or anarchist ideology, or other types of left-leaning pro-working rights and pro-working class things like socialism, have like this barrier of intellectual obscurity to them now, when they're supposed to be the working class information, or the working class drive for a better future. and it is that is very interesting. Thus, material gain has no role to play in motivating artistic creation, and true artists are immune to the egoism, mediocrity, the honor of the state, or the applause of the crowd. Their recompense are in themselves and not in success. Memes are proof that this is true. No one pays for memes, and memes have to be the most popular form of postmodern art in existence, and they have absolutely no economic value as of yet. I mean, like, some places try and integrate memes into advertising and stuff, but they're never successful because memes are kind of like this perfect capturing of the people's art, in my opinion. They are, like all art, kind of like forms of propaganda, but that's inherent to art in general. Uh, but that I love the idea that or I just love that idea because I think memes almost like prove that art will continue to be created whether there's like an economic incentive or not. Because I hear that argument for like capitalist structures very often, where it is just, well, capitalism is the reason that people do anything. People just sit around and do nothing if it weren't for capitalism. But like capitalism's pretty new. How did we get where we are if people only do things because of money? That just doesn't make any sense. And it's never made any sense. It's such a non-point, in my opinion. On this basis, the aristocratic rejects art promoted within state academia, the gallery system, or that developed by the coterie of independents who belong to the alternative salons. Ooh, fries and tacos sounds nice. I need to order some groceries, but it's snowy as heck, and I don't want anyone to drive on this road. So, like, I'm trying to wait to see if the sun melts some more of the ice off the roads, because I can't in good conscience order anything while it's so darn icy out. I don't want anyone to get hurt delivering me things. But I keep checking out the window every now and then to see if the roads are a little better. It like snowed like crazy all day on Christmas where I am, which was cool. I had a white Christmas. How was everyone else's Christmas that's in chat? Or anything else? Or are there any other holidays that are celebrated at the same time of Christmas? I know, like, what is it? Hanukkah happens before Christmas, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, Hanukkah happened way earlier. I don't know a whole lot about like holidays. Three irregular or interrelated themes pervade Lucas Dussum's criticism: distinctions between bourgeoisie and aristocratic forms of art, and instead. Oh, the painting. I haven't worked on it any since I primed it. I didn't do anything yesterday because it was Christmas, and then today I am waiting for my partner to get home from visiting her family. She's gonna get home around 5, I think she said. So I was just gonna do it. I was doing a short reading stream before then. But the painting is just the base that I laid down. I'm thinking I need to maybe get like a either a better camera or maybe a lighting system, because I realized yesterday that unless I have like good sunlight coming in through my windows, my dingy apartment is not that conducive to showing painting on stream. So it's kind of made me lean more into practicing the digital painting, because off of the advice of Angel, I've been having a lot of fun practicing the digital painting with those new settings. Um, and it's just easier, I think, easier to see on the stream. So I'm thinking of maybe getting like a ring light or something to put behind my monitor so that I can light up the painting as I work on it, and possibly getting like maybe a camera instead of a webcam, so that I can have like more higher quality and maybe close-ups, because another thing is I'd like to be able to do detail shots of areas that I'm working on, and right now, the only way I can work on them is kind of like get in the way of it, which some people might not mind, but I do want to have a viewing experience that is, um, kind of enjoyable. So I might put working on the painting on hold until I can figure out a way to better display working on it on a stream. Another idea I was having would possibly be setting up like um, I saw someone set up kind of this like track camera on a rectangular bar, so that it can move around over like your work table, and I'd like to be able to do something like that so that I could maybe like do illustrations on my desk or something as well, and have the my camera like point down at them. But right now the only thing I can do if I want to like show off the camera is pick up my webcam and like shove it as close as I can to it. Yeah, I'm excited to work on it too, especially since these paintings are going to be part of my graduation show for next semester. So I will probably, or I will definitely I have like a deadline that's going to force me to work on them irregardless. It's just far as like recording progress on them. I think I need to find a system better than just plopping um, my canvas in front of my webcam. While he dismisses academicism and anti-academic art on material grounds for catering to the economic interests of the state or the art market, academics are also critiqued on the basis of vitalist theory or artistic expression. Break with the stupid art of academies, proclaims Lucas Duther, because they represent inaction and impotence. They destroy by pretending to conserve. That which exists for only retain from tradition, from evolution, waste. That which is living and positive is misunderstood and condemned by them. God, all of these old writings, I'm constantly like surprised by how, like, how just relevant they are even now. I don't know about other places in the world, but America's conservative party seems to directly attack art, and it's just amazing that all essentially like conservative and authoritarian groups throughout history have always kind of attacked art. Academies distort tradition by identifying with the slavish imitation of art of the past, an aristocrat in embracing the living and positive, adherence to tradition by emulating its novelty as the product of genius. Art is the product of individual creativity. That's almost like basically saying they're relying on nostalgia. That's almost like what Disney does, how they just keep remastering their old movies. Like, I think there's an argument to be made that some of Disney's first animated movies are art. Like, they are art. But at this point, they create, like, a parody of themselves in the form of a commodified version of that art in their live-action remakes. Because have any of those been good? Like, I don't think any of them have. As the product of genius, art is the product of individual creativity. To cope by the... I don't really believe individual creativity is like individual creativity is real, but this person who Lucas Duther, he's an anarchist individualist, so he is kind of playing up the individual's role in everything too much. People are definitely autonomous and have like interesting autonomous decisions to make in art, but ultimately, like, art is more of a product of the milieu of the individual's experience and the individual's intellectual curiosity expressed via art. So, I like creativity is like just a weird word. I'm not disagreeing with it. I'm just saying I think there's more to it, and that's a little reductive than saying it is just a product of individual creativity. That that's kind of a romantic and fanciful way to describe how art comes about, because it is kind of romantic to think about an individual almost having this divine inspiration that produces all of the miraculous art throughout history. But the truth is, like, art is an expression of individuals' lived experiences and ideas, culminating in a visual expression or an innovative intellectual pursuit for a redefinition of the technical aspects that we have come to rely on in the visual. At the heart of Lucas Duther's definition of true art is a correlation between creativity and novelty. Life is an unending creation, and because art is a form of creation, it is a novel, as life itself. Those who side with beauty thus side with life, and reject the classifications which mutilates life, the arbitrary categories with restraint to Elen. This correlation between artistic creation and vital Lin derives from the Bergsonian criticism of fellow aristocrat Andre Colmenar, who declared artistic creation to be the product of the aristocrat's intuitive experience of the elan vital. Let's look up that phrase, elan vital, because it's been used multiple times now. Force or impulse of life, especially a creative principle held by Bergson's to the imminent. Okay, so it's a very specific word. It's like it's almost like the spirit or soul of it. Like Lucas Duther, he thought artistic activity synonymous with revolt against social norms, while the utilitarian and mercantile motivations were manifestations of an intellectual impediment to the intuitive elan vital. I'm just going to say soul, the intuitive soul of each creative individual to assess an object or activity on the basis of its monetary value, alone robbed it of its qualitative significance, just as the uniqueness of an experience or thing would be lost if each were treated as an is treated as interchangeable with another, as it was when its value was measured in coin. I haven't thought about that idea in the commodification of art, that it almost devalues the creativity because it puts a value on ideas. That's an interesting kind of ephemeral concept to consider, is how the commodification of art is more commodifying the ideas expressed. Now, I'm sure to the bourgeoisie buyers and sellers, they don't really care what the art's about or expresses, but I think it is fascinating to think about how the how it is putting a value on ideas, and if a bourgeoisie buyer or seller really did have like a philosophical agenda they wish to express through the means of their purchasing power, they could very much do that by only having art that promotes an idyllic version of the world as if they see it can be created, as the like forms of high bourgeois art are absolutely controlled by the purchasing power of the bourgeois. That's cool to think about. To assess the objective, okay, yeah. Kalmner cited Bergson in regarding noting that the philosopher identified with such normative and homogenizing criteria of evaluation with an intellectual rather than intuitive point of view. For Bergson, an intellectual perspective robs experience of its qualitative import and fails to recognize that life, like art, is the product of creative activity. That's basically what I was saying earlier. That like creativity is more like an expression of. Am I saying it correctly? I say bourgeoisie. I've never known whether I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's a important word. I think maybe individuals that are trying to advocate for class equality in America specifically should maybe move away from the word, just because it seems to have too many polluted connotations with everyone in America kind of being afraid of the great big Marxist boogeyman. But I love the word. Also, like, again, that's just going back to the French, or like kind of the kings of protest, or kings and queens, not to exclude, of protest. So, of course, one of the most iconic words associated with addressing class disparity is French. Alright, where was I? I totally lost myself. Declared Korean. Okay, yeah. Rolled against social norms, while the utilitarian and mercantile motivations were manifestations of intellectual impediment to the intuitive soul of each creation. Or no, I was down here. Yeah. It's like. Don't enunciate the R. So, like, bourgeoisie or bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie? I should know better too, because like my professor that gave me this book, I'm pretty sure she speaks French. So. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. I will now be able to say bourgeoisie correctly. Okay, and I was down here. Kalmner cited Bergson. Okay. Kalmner cited Bergson in his regard, noting that philosopher identified such normative and homogenizing criteria of evolution within an intellectual rather than an intuitive point of view. For Bergson, an intellectual perspective robs experience of its qualitative import, fails to recognize the. Okay, yeah, I was right here. Kalmner gave Leque's Duther anarchism epistemological by aligning the aristocratic revolt with what was then the most powerful critique of materialism in France: anarchism and avant-gardism. Since artistic tradition is composed of successive radical innovations, the aristocrat emulates tradition by being radically innovative as past artists. The true tradition, states Lecouz-Duther, is a tradition of revolt and emancipation. The tradition we represent is the tradition of free ideas. Every idea is revolutionary. Of past art, all that which had been new, all which was opposed to prejudice and habit, is our tradition. According to Lecouz-Duther, I am sure I'm just absolutely destroying that name. It is by building that we destroy. For genius edifies and constructs without cease, and it is by affirming the reality of the ideal that it ruins the agitation of mediocrities. Creation therefore follows its course in the midst of ugliness and its errors. The creative artist is everywhere confronted by society that shuns novelty and embraces an academic art that conforms to state-sanctioned bourgeois values. I'm sure the context here is that at the time, if I am not mistaken, the Salon was essentially a government-run art show. So like I was saying, it is an interesting idea that the bourgeois essentially get to choose what is in the zeitgeist of high art, because they have the purchasing power of affirming the value of high art. So at this time, it was the government and through state power that they affirmed the ideas that they wished to have produced in art that was considered or that was promoted as successful. So I'm sure that is the context by which that critique is made. I believe it was like specifically Napoleon Bonaparte III, had put or had first created state restrictions and standards to what was allowed to appear in the Salon. The correlation between creativity and novelty and identification of aesthetic vanguardism with the revolutionary change is a paradigm that pervades Cubist-related art criticism. When Apollinaire called upon artists to innovate violently, or Picasso proclaimed his art to be the sum of destructions, both artists and poet related Cubism's departure from academic conventions to the Nietzschean creation of new social values in his book Les Pentres Cubistes. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry for that pronunciation. The Apollinaire described Picasso as newborn, a protean creation who ordered the universe in accordance with his requirements. Like Lecouz-Duther and André Colner, he identified artistic novelty with a new way of thinking and a I don't know that word. Naturally accompanying or associative.
Concomitant.
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 Concomitant. Okay, concomitant. Naturally. Oh, excuse me. Naturally accompanying or associated. And a concomitant break from the bourgeoisie, bourgeoisie, yeah, okay, bourgeoisie ordered allied to imitative thinking and thus impotent academicism. This Nietzschean vocabulary which wedded the transformation of accepting norms and values with an individualist revolt against uh, bourgeoisie convention was also shared by the Cubist Albert Glaze and Jean Metzinger, though they were more reticent about the anarchist import of such ideas. Glaze ended a 1911 essay on Metzinger by praising him as one who gives us many new values, that he inspires a ferocious opposition on the part of those artists and critics unable to create their joint publication. De Cubism bourgeoisie, 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 bourgeoisie. I might as well just learn French, like bourgeoisie. At this point, it'll just help me better because half of these artistic journals are like 30% French, because France was just so pivotally important to the culmination of the Western world of art. Bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie. Okay. Bourgeoisie. De Cubism, Glaze, and Metzinger went one step further by separating themselves from their public on the basis of the latter's lack of creativity, comprehension. State Glaze and Metzinger in Do Cubism cannot evolve as rapidly as the creative faculties, with result that the public long remains the slave of painting image, and persists in seeing the world only through the adopted sign. An artist's role, therefore, is likely to impose new perceptual conventions on the public by creating a symbol likely to affect others. To Glaze and Metzinger's mind, such persuasions can be accomplished if the artistic innovations of previous generations are recast after their own creative responses. Lecoq-Duthar professed similar sentiment when he noted that the original works have against them I took 3 years, 3 years of Latin in high school. I remember nothing, not like anything at all. I could maybe like recognize a word here or there at random, but yeah, I don't know. I think I don't know where you or when you took French, but I took my language in high school, and high school language classes are, in my experience, next to useless. I don't know anyone that took a language in high school that still knows anything about that language today. I don't know why that is, but I feel like we should also be teaching language earlier. It's so hard to learn a language once you're like already a teenager or whatever. They should probably be teaching language in elementary school, like second languages in elementary school in America. Oh, it's totally obsolete. I took it because I like the English language in general, and like exploring like etymological origins of things, and because English is one of the like love languages, as we were taught in my Latin classes. It's one of the languages that kind of descended from Latin, along with like Spanish, French, German, and I can't remember. I just remember as English, Spanish, French, and German. I think those were the love languages, as they're called. Yeah, no, I kind of regret it. I should have like learned, or I should have taken something like French or Spanish, or a language that someone that's alive on Earth speaks. It's probably the biggest regret I have in high school is taking Latin, because I was also bad at it. So, oh yeah, Mandarin. I've always wanted to learn Mandarin because Mandarin's the most spoken language on the planet now, isn't it? I feel like I feel like it's the most spoken. I know it's the hardest, yeah, especially for anyone who learns something like English first, because it's so wildly different. I've heard like learning Mandarin can change the way your thoughts form in your mind, because it's like such a hard language to learn. I don't know anything about like brain chemistry and stuff, so I don't know if that's true. I could be totally making that up, but that is interesting to think about, that learning languages can like remap your brain. Okay, to Glaze and Mingzinger minds such a, okay, yeah, I was just past this. Lucas Dether professed similar sentiments when he noted the original works have against them the rationalist spirit of the public, which bursts out laughing before a work it does not understand. I think that's true. Furthermore, since Bergenson described all creative acts as heterogeneous and unrepeatable, Glaze, oh, he'd be mad about what was it, the robot they built to reproduce works that were in what, Baroque style. Let's see, robot that paints.
The singularity is the theoretical day that artificial intelligence advances beyond human understanding and begins to change civilization in ways we can't conceive of. Many fear the singularity.
Want to try the grit?
Not Pindar Van Arman. He's doing his small part to make it happen by teaching robots to make art. He's writing code that nobody's seen before.
I could
and
believe
thinks his
that.
machines are on the precipice
I
of
definitely
creative
don't think I
autonomy.
could learn Mandarin without a personal tutor.
The style's like just as interesting.
Wow,
And like,
that looks cool.
and here is Guernica. A little darker, but transfer good.
Yeah, that looks like human suffering on my face.
here's the painting that.
Pindar is a computer security contractor in Northern Virginia, but for the last 12
This
years,
is like
he's been making
creepy
robot artists on the
to a
side.
degree.
These portraits are made by sending the computer two images and running an algorithm called style transfer. It takes content and style from one and applies it to the other.
Here's you as Marilyn Monroe.
So, it doesn't quite capture what Andy Warhol is doing though, right? Because like, instead of just making my hair blonde, it gave me like Marilyn hair. So how would it have to progress to
Yeah,
make it
yeah,
more in the
they're-
style of Warhol?
I mean,
Yeah,
to be
it doesn't-
fair,
it
they're
doesn't
not
really capture
really
context
making
right now.
they're not really making fine art. What they're doing is literally essentially like computerized mashing. There's one that's even creepier, that they had a computer analyze all the pieces of art from just Baroque, and I think it was Baroque, from just Baroque, and then they made the yeah, then they made that robot try and produce fake Baroque paintings that were so perfectly in Baroque style that they were trying to trick art historians into believing like that these paintings were actually like newly discovered Baroque pieces. And I think they tricked like all of them, because it just did such a perfect job. And it turns out like you can't really make a computer have like genuine creativity, but you can create a computer that creates things just like an artist that created things based on their body of work. And that's like even creepier. That's almost like one of those things, like programming your brain into a computer so that you can like live on in a digital afterlife. That's almost what that is in my mind, is having a robot entirely recreate the artistic like style and stuff of a long dead artist.
So style transfer does amazing things. A lot of data scientists are trying to make this even better, including myself. We're trying to find a way to add the context to it. We just don't know how yet.
The hardware is pretty basic. The robots can be built for just a few $100s.
There's the AI working.
The special sauce is his software program, a decade in the making, called Cloud Painter. Like a human artist, Cloud Painter remembers its past work and can try to improve it, and its style evolved over time. And the robots can see what they're doing, because they use cameras to watch their work in progress and make adjustments.
I want them to always watch what they're painting, because that's when they make the really good decisions.
Do the robots ever create something that falls in the uncanny valley where it's kind of creepy?
I've been at exhibitions where
You can actually access this software that these do yourself. I combined two of my art pieces together to make this right here using one of these same like AI thing, or one of these same like learning algorithm things. So I combined a little pen and paper self-portrait I did, and I combined it with this piece right here. And it created that. So I combined just a black and white pen and ink drawing, a little self-portrait, and this painting through machine learning, and it produced that. I think quite a few places journalism is kind of unethical. I mostly try and follow individual journalists instead of organizations, so I can agree with that. They occasionally do some good stuff, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's healthier to find the individual journalists and follow the individual journalists from different organizations that have a track record of like good practice and trustability.
or a fellow artist has come and said, I don't know whether to be really impressed with this or really disgusted with it. And so it's in the uncanny valley in that I am trying to replicate human creativity. And it does make some people uneasy.
Pandar can tell the robot to paint whoever walks in front of the robot's camera. Or he can program it to paint something based on what's trending in Google News. But that still essentially means Pandar's the artist, and the robot is his medium.
Can a robot be creative?
Yeah, I definitely can be creative, but it's like a question of like, what level of creativity? Like, I think my robots.
I disagree. I don't think a robot can be creative, actually. Because I don't define creativity as creating something random. That's like there's a majesty. There is an awe and a beauty. There is an aesthetic to things that are essentially randomly created, like nature. Like everything on Earth is essentially random chance. Like we ourselves only exist almost through random chance. So there is definitely a majesty and an awe to things like that. But I don't think what a robot's doing is technically creative. Because I think creativity is quite literally the expression of lived experience and intellectual curiosity and expression. Until you have a robot that can have lived experiences and like a life, and it's drawing from things it experienced specifically, and its outlook and the things that happen to it and to its society that it partakes in, I don't think it can be creative. So until we get like literal virtual intelligences that are experiencing like lives, I don't think they can actually be creative.
They make portraits. They make all the same creative decisions I make.
it's actually making decisions about what to do.
Yeah, I have some paintings that I don't make a single decision. All I do is turn the robot on and say, paint the next person that walks in front of the camera. So there is a way a robot can use an evolutionary approach to develop an algorithm. It can randomly select all these algorithms, paint a bunch of brush strokes randomly on 10 different canvases, throw them up for sale on eBay. Whichever one sells the highest, it tries to paint a little more like that.
Do you think your robot?
Oof. Oof. Oh, that is the straight commodification of art. That's actually leads like right into what the article was just talking, or the journal we were reading was just talking about, is the separation of art from being commodified and empty. Because, like I said, even if these things might be aesthetically pretty and fun to look at, they are ultimately hollow and valueless in creativity because they express no lived experience, they have no message, they're just like, a pretty picture. And there's like a use for that type of art in society, but that type of art is essentially, like advertisement and package design and things like that. They have functional utility uses, but I have to say they're not creative, and by that fact, they're not really art.
Has started making more beautiful paintings over time.
If beauty is measured by how interesting it is, definitely much more beautiful. But aesthetically, the aesthetics are going in an unsure direction, because if I just wanted to make a beautiful painting, I could use a printer and print it out and be perfect. And so I'm going away from that. I'm trying to get more interpretation, more serendipity.
Ken Goldberg is an artist and professor of engineering who runs a robotics lab at UC Berkeley. We showed him how Pindar's robots work.
Robots will do unexpected things all the time. But the fact that it does something a little bit surprising doesn't mean that it's creative. The saying is the nature of most machines, that they'll do things you don't expect. As soon as you inject any kind of randomness into a program, you get behavior that you may not predict. And this is essential to a lot of the deep learning or AI methods that are out there now. Being able to show where this uncertainty is arising is very interesting conceptually. But I want to make a distinction between that and saying, well, the robot is now being creative.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I didn't know that they were gonna have that person come on and say that, but that's absolutely what I was just trying to get across. Is this is not creativity. This is like an imitation of style, in some forms, or essentially a random synthesis of design, which is not creativity. It's kind of like how I don't think Jackson Pollock's splatter paintings are art, because you literally could have produced them randomly. Just because there's a claimed like introspection and thought and consideration to where the splatters go does not mean it's creative. Art is creative when it is, embodying some kind of intellectual curiosity, some kind of philosophical curiosity, some kind of critique or advancement of technique. It's a conflation of like
I think
definitions to
when people
me.
see a great work of art, one reason they relate to it is because we think, oh, this great artist had the same emotion as me. So how could a robot create that?
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, a robot won't be able to make emotional artwork until it is emotional. But that doesn't mean that when we look at a piece of artwork, we can't get emotions from it. So, every so often, my robot will paint a picture that looks like a sad person, and that might make me feel sad. The robot was obviously not sad when it made it, but it didn't stop me from having that emotional reaction.
And that's more just that last little statement is more just the individual kind of like leaning on the crutch of human expression for emotion. Because I'm sure if you just had it, draw landscapes or something, no matter how abstracted or interesting they might be, they're still going to be, you know, emotionally hollow, intellectually hollow, unless you start actually like having an AI that can, like I said, have lived, learned experiences and connections. Like, that's another thing. The social aspect of art is absolutely important. So I don't think it can really be considered creative if there isn't some kind of connection to others either. Unless the art itself is about isolation, but then you'd have to have like an AI that can experience loneliness. And oh my god, is that like, that sounds almost kind of like cruel. Like, why design something like that can experience sadness and isolation? That's when you start like getting into where some like really really theoretical stuff like robot or like AI rights, because if an AI can suffer, then I think it has rights, because it has the right to not suffer then. Alright, Glees and Metzinger went one step further by separating themselves from their public on the basis of latter's lack of creativity, comprehension. Stay gaze, Metzinger in do cubism cannot evolve as rapidly. Alright, yeah. Therefore it is likely to impose new perceptual conventions on the public by creating symbol likely to affect others. To Glaze and Metzinger's minds, such persuasion can be accomplished if the artist's innovations of previous generations are recast after their own creative response. Lecaze-Duther professed similar sentiments when he noted that the original works have against them the rational spirit of the public, which burst out laughing before when they are not understood. Furthermore, since Bergenson described all creative acts as heterogeneous and unrepeatable, Glaze, Metzinger, and the rhetoric Colomer were quick to declare aesthetic imitation antithetical to the creative impulse, and thus untenable as a mode of artistic production. Similar Lecaze-Duther reference to the rational spirit governing the hostile public alludes to Bergson's distinction between the rational and intuitive, which Colomer employed in the separation of how we say it again. Bourgeoisie. Yeah, bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie and aristocratic state of mind for the aristocrat and the cubist. An aesthetic identified with the rational is condemned as antithetical to creative intuition. They wish to promote, in short, the aristocratic correlation of creativity with novelty echoed the vocabulary of artists and critics in the cubist camp. And it should come to no surprise to learn that Apollinaire's less Pinterest cubist and Glaze had a Metzinger do cubism were both sold in the Action to Art bookstore. Indeed, André Colmner declared these texts to be amenable to the aristocrats, individuals, and anarchically idealist tendencies, followed by the revival of Action to Art in 1919. Colmner continued to view Cubism in favorable light, linking his anarchist pacifism to that of the Unanimists and their Cubist allies, publishing articles on Cubist exhibition and even winning over pacifist Albert Glaze, who was projected to write a regular column on art for the journal. That endorsement, however, also came with some serious reservations, indicative of general schisms within aristocratic rank over the merit of the modernist, in the criticism of Lecaze-Duther, who those doubt took form of a condemnation of those who embrace a pretext of novelty aesthetic to aristocratic originality. Such pretext was found among the independent, those artists exhibiting in the Salon des independents who irreversibly formed a coterie and presented the public with the extravagant and bizarre in the name of originality. It's so weird how these things always connect together because, yeah, the extravagant and the bizarre is a good way of basically saying they did random stuff in the name of calling it creative, which is kind of what the robot's doing random stuff in the name of being creative. The cube, okay, where was I? In the name of originality. Since the public lacks aesthetic consciousness, it is susceptible to such bluff and incoherence. Although Le Coeur does not name the cubist, his extension of his critique to encompass all artists associated with the Société des Artistes Indépendants suggested that he regarded the Fauvist, Cubist, and Futurist movements as mere attempts at self-promotion. That's probably definitely true for Futurists. Let me see about Fauvist. I don't know Fauvist off the top of my head. Okay, Fauvism, French for the Wild Beast, a group of early 20th century modern artists who worked emphasized painterly qualities and strong color over representational realistic value retained by Impressionism. While Fauvism as a style began around 1904 and continued beyond 1910, the movement as such lasted only a few years. A lot of these only lasted only a few years. Really? Matisse was considered Fauvist? Interesting. Well, I mean, it's not like I don't think it is inherently I don't think a lot of this is inherently aggrandizing, but I can see what he means because things like Matisse's art, like something like this. Well, Matisse in general was more self-obsessed with his with the act of painting than I think much else. And it looks like Matisse was a big chunk of the Fauvist movement. I'm sure the critique here is that apart from technical exploration, these works are kind of shallow in or probably potentially shallow in their cultural expression, so could probably be easily used as art for art's sake, bourgeois art, or my bad, bourgeois art. Yeah, bourgeois art, not bourgeois, bourgeois. I definitely don't think the cubists, or at least the major cubists, were doing it for self-aggrandizement. Picasso was definitely doing it as a genuine expression of advancement in art and an interest in African art and re-expressing it through like a Western lens. Attempt at self-promotion on the part of the modernists. Unlike Kalmer, he doubted the sincerity of these artists because he thought their art to be little more than an advertisement designed to attract attention and thus increase sales. Again, like, I don't think art in times of innovation, like, considering the camera had just come out around this time and everyone is starting to, like, go, we can't just use art as a historical and like a historical visual recording device anymore, because cameras are going to do that better no matter what. They're going to do it faster and more efficiently. So I think the discussion here is aimed at kind of saying that art needs to lean more on its political and social aspects rather than its aesthetic aspects, but I don't see why it can't do both. I would definitely agree that a huge chunk of Picasso's work is early Cubist work is more of a technical exploration, but to say things like the Guernica are not just as expressive of the like social and political expressions of other more anarchist arts that this Duther guy prefers is kind of absurd. But then again, I'm sure this was written before the making of the Guernica, so taking that with a grain of salt. Commerce and art precluded each other's states. Lequesne Duther to make a painting to sell. This is the proletarian of financiers and merchants. Those artists who reject academic methods only to declare themselves a part of some new bizarre tendency conceive art as a field for politics. For them, it is a business deal promoted through advertising and hoax. Since the art of the salon is commercialized, the novelty of Cubist or Futurist form is presumably nothing more than a publicity stunt, lacking the serious intentions of the aristocrat. Rather than follow Kalmaner in the correlation of aristocratic and Cubist avant-gardism, Lequesne Duther claimed that the commercialism of the latter group made their vanguardism a mere hoax, devoid of any anarchist credibility, since Kalmaner's support of the modernist was premised on the Bergsonian aesthetic. Lequesne Duther was quick to distance himself from the philosophical assumptions, claiming that Kalmaner had developed his Bergsonian theory independently. Perhaps the most important aspect of Lequesne Duther's criticism was his attempt to define a social role for for the aristocrat, to distinguish his theory from one that would cast artists in a role of an elite aesthete. I'm gonna have to look that word up. Person was a effect to have special appreciation of art and beauty.
Aesthete.
Aesthete. Okay. Aesthete. That kind of just seems like a brag. It's like if I was just like, yeah, I'm an aesthete. I have a special appreciation for art that other people can't have because I'm an aesthete. I'm so special. Alright. He surprisingly allied his doctrine to the theories of Oscar Wilde, whose ideas were fundamental to the Action to Art project. Both Wilde and Lequesne Duther regarded the artistic point of view as synonymous with an individualism that actively rebels against social norms and is autonomous from all influence outside of one's personal need for self-expression. Although Wilde legendarily exemplifies an apolitical art for art's sake position, the art for art's sake position is kind of, it only has merit, in my opinion, when there is a period in which technical exploration is valid after some kind of medium advancement or something like that. So I'm not one for art's sake in that regard. But also, I am one for saying that art should be something more than commodity. His Soul of Man Under Socialism, 1891, expressly identified the artistic point of view with social revolt. In Wilde's view, all individuals have potential to develop into artists, provided they possess the material means to free themselves from the best suits the artists, or from utilitarian concerns. Moreover, he claimed that the form of government which best suits the artist is the absence of all government, and planned to replace the state with a voluntary association based on the spirit of cooperation rather than competition. I ain't mad at that idea. If you could actually get it done, I ain't mad at that idea. I kind of like it. By converting private property into public wealth and substituting cooperation for competition, we will restore society to its proper condition of a thoroughly happy organism. Yeah, we really need that. We need a change of changing of society into a thoroughly happy organism. Because right now we are an unhappy organism. And ensure the material well-being of each member of the community. Lake Wilde thought that every individual should be able to live like an artist whose sole purpose in life is to create beauty. However, Wilde differed from Lacreze-Duther in his description of the means by which such goals could be realized. For Wilde, the creation of a society of artists could be achieved if one did away with private ownership and let all members of society share material goods equally. Ooh, I'm also a fan of that idea. In the manner, each individual would be able to adopt the disinterested attitude of the artist who can afford to ignore life's utilitarian concerns. I don't know if that's the greatest way to characterize artists, as that's kind of like saying that you can't be an artist if you're not wealthy enough to be disinterested in the inner workings and struggles of life. I don't know about that. Maybe I'm misunderstanding that line, but Lacreze-Duther too thought that artistic creation should be divorced from material need. Well, now I'm confused by what Duther even is talking about, because he's talking about how it can't be just a commodified entity, but he's also saying it needs to have social and political discourse laced into its creation. How does that track with also needing to be divorced from material need? That's weird to me. But he provided no concrete social program for the realization of his schism. Thus, Lacreze-Duther called upon artists to abandon state patronage or the salon system without suggesting an alternative means of substance beyond the outlined by Wilde. Well, I mean, I guess it still makes a little more sense in the context of that it is a criticism of the French salon system of government-promoted art. So I do need to constantly consider that this is within a certain context. He provided no Thus, Lacreze-Duther called upon artists to abandon state patronage or the salon system. Wilde thought the redistribution of wealth a prerequisite for the creation of an anarchist society. I mean, kind of, because anarchism is required that you dismember all unjust hierarchies, so you can't really have people that are so rich that you could combine 100,000 other people and they'd still be richer than those 100,000 people. That is kind of inherent unjust hierarchy. By contrast, the members of the Action to Art collective asserted that each individual simply had first to adopt the psychological attitude of the aristocrat to realize a social revolution. For Lacroix-Duthar, the attitude was synonymous with a state of psychological and physiological equilibrium, or harmony, that in turn produced a desire to share this experience with others. I mean, I think most people want to share, especially positive experiences with others. An aristocrat's life is beautiful because she or he is being free of all dogma, possessing his own law, his own morality. So, again, this is where I'm a little confused, because the aristocrats of the time would have just been like rich people. Would they not have they would have been the intellectual and financial elite of society. So he is at the same time advocating for the redistribution. Maybe he's saying that via the redistribution of wealth, everyone would be able to live as an aristocrat, which maybe, I don't know 100%, but maybe. I'm just a little confused by this constant dichotomy of him advocating for these political and social reform aspects of art, while also continually kind of like talking about how good and creative the aristocracy is. His own morality, sole master of his destiny, creating his life harmoniously, such as he believed. This is also kind of just indicative of the age of the time, that it is gendered. The aristocrat is a he by default. Managed to equilibrate all his passions, all his ideas, and to rejuvenate and renew himself through his incessant action in this manner. The aristocrat will not only grasp the profound meaning of life, but through action reveal this meaning to all. Again, this is really weird to me for an anarchist figure to essentially just be like, kind of like, just aggrandizing the aristocracy, which I think is kind of an opposite thing, or that should be done. But again, I'm not totally sure whether it's saying that through redistribution all would be the equivalent of the aristocracy. Or maybe it's an example saying that the independence and freedom that the aristocracy has needs to be shared amongst all people, because that form of life is more wholesome and in turn fulfilling, so that it leads to the creation of more complex art and society. But that could be like reading into it. But also through action. Okay. Such is the task of the writer of the artist. Elsewhere, psychological equilibrium is given its literary correlate in lyricism, since it alone realizes the equilibrium, the beauty, the justice in the work, as well as the equilibrium of the form and the idea. The life of the aristocrat, therefore, is like a harmonious poem, motivated by love. As a result, aristocratic activity does not pass unnoticed, for his enthusiasm, his sympathy, gradually modifies his environment. Contrast this with poets renews life in us, and we become conscious of ourselves. If we imitate the poets who only listen to the voice of inspiration, in this manner Lacroix-Duthar separates art for art's sake, elitism from its conception of the aristocrat, noting that the latter does not shun the public, but actively seeks to set an example for others through the beauty of his or her activity. It's interesting that it's his or her here, but it's all gendered he in the beginning. The theory outlined above was applied by La Action to Art in a protest campaign against government censorship. I mean, fair. You do have a government body producing what, or declaring what is like fine art. In 1920, the state condemnation of Jacob... I understand that, like, people have the same names, but come on, like... We got condemnation of an Epstein. We got an Epstein in 1912. Did he also get... Or did he also kill himself in a jail cell? Epstein's monumental Oscar Wilde tomb for his supposed obscenity became a rallying point for the aristocrats' opposition to the Third Republic. The Wilde tomb was the subject of controversy because the public declaration on the part of the Préfecture de Police and the official Committee d'Esthétique that the winged figure on the tomb was offensive by reason of its highly legible genitals. They were mad by... There was public outcry because it had angel pee-pee. There was angel pee-pee, so they got mad. I love puritanical outrage because it's always just so funny. They got mad at angel pee-pee. In a series of articles, La Action d'Art critic Alt defended the Wilde monument in the name of aristocratic principle developed by his colleagues. Thus, Alt employed Lacruz-Duthor correlation between the aristocratic temperament and psychological equilibrium in his defense of the sexual content of the statue, noting that anyone in full possession of his sexual equilibrium cannot be offended before the symbol of virality. I mean, sure, yeah. I guess I can see that. I don't know about the symbol of virality, but I agree that it's silly to get mad over angel pee-pee. Alt related his protest to the work of other artists, taking note that the Commission de Sculpture de Salon, La Société Nationale des... Oh my god, that's a long title. Des Beaux Arts had suppressed the exhibition of the work of sculptor Gio de L on similar grounds by declaring the government's prohibition against monuments the product of pathology. And an insult to the simply dignity of a healthy man. The Action d'Art campaign. I'm sure that just means campaign, so I'm going to say campaign. Campaign turned the table on Committee d'Esthétique, calling into question its own sexual and psychological health. This attack must have been all the more satisfying since the committee was composed of important artists of the École de Beaux Art and members of the Institute. Very defenders of the state-sanctioned art, Lacruz-Duthor condemned as morally corrupt and artistically impotent. Alt and his colleagues declared the tomb to be one of those free and harmonious manifestations of aesthetic individualism, fully in keeping with the anarchist philosophy of Wilde himself. Thus, as part of their campaign, they published extracts from Wilde's Soul of a Man Under Socialism, noting that they only sought to defend the work of a sculpture threatened by the government arbiter, but to affirm their admiration for the beautiful poet who died in misery, tracked down by all the social forces, most ardent of the individualists. The Action d'Art Collective then sought their case to the public with petitions protesting state censorship and defending principles of individualism. The Action to Art Collective then sought their case to the public with petition protesting by state censorship and defending the principles of liberty itself. In art. By reproducing an image of sculpture, they hope to appease the public of the sculpture's actual appearance and make plain underlying homophobic and anti-sexual prejudice that motivated the state's case. Wow, I did not expect there to be a conversation around homophobia in a 1920 discussion around angel pee-pee. Wait, is this the piece? Yeah, this is the piece. Wait a minute. I can't even see no angel pee-pee. I was promised angel pee-pee. What? Where's the outrage? I was expecting, like, massive angel pee-pee. I cannot see any angel pee-pee, so where's the outrage? The success of their campaign can be measured by the list of respondents contained in the 15 April 1913 issue. Among those who declared themselves pour liberté de l'art was a virtue cross-section of the partisan modernist, including the writer Apollinaire, Paul Fort, Max Jacob, Oliver Hauerkard, Louis Mandan, Jean Muller, and Alexander Merceru. All these figures were associated with the neo-symbolist movement. Moreover, prominent Cubist supported the protest, most notably Alexander Archipenko, Blaise Pierre, Dumont, Francis Picabie, and Felix Eli Tobin. The list of signatories even included luminaries from abroad, such as the Secretary General of London's Allied Artists Association and the like of White and Lewis, William Roberts, Charles Jenner, and Spencer. Okay, so it was very popular. Between sexual liberation, anarcho-individualism, and the precepts of Max Stirner had simultaneously been forged in England by the Modernist Journal. The Modernist response to the aristocratic campaign attests to an awareness of movement and the manner in which their aristocrats broadened their audience by coaching their petitions in terms of freedom of expression rather than an attack on the commercialization of art. They were able to win endorsement of artists and critics who thought otherwise, had felt compromised by the implications of the aristocrat protest. I think you also see that now. You see so many rich moguls doing things against the interests of the public in the name of freedom. So I kind of feel like this is a bit of a ploy. Politicizing the artistic medium. The Wild campaign was initiated by Mexican artist Geraldo Murillo in 1875 to 1964, who took the pseudonym Dr. Alt. Alt was favorably positioned to rally the partisan modernists to Epstein's defense, for he was an artist whom Guillaume Apollinaire openly admires, an individual with lofty aims and aesthetic discipline. Such unqualified admiration, however, was not reciprocated, for Alt endorsed Lacruz Duthar critique of Cubist commercialism. Alt criticism in L'Action de Art focused on two major themes: a condemnation of the commercial motive in art and development of an alternative aesthetic amendable to the heroic ideals of the aristocracy. In speaking of mercantilism, Alt followed Lecouz-Duthre in disparaging the salon system as commercially motivated. I mean, it probably... I think it was even less commercially motivated and more motivated as a form of propaganda, because it was state-run. But maybe that's what they mean by commercially, like just as like advertisement and not commercial and like commodity. Um, in attacking... Yawn. Okay. Modernists for their complicity in the money economy. Thus, in his first essay for La Action de Art, Alt characterized the artist who would exhibit in the salons as a modest employee of a company of art exploitation. I mean, kind of. And that's why, like I said, Thursday, there is kind of there is this, like, exploitative aspect of, like, these, of galleries in general, because they are essentially, I mean, it's almost just like you're their employee, relying on their gracious patronage, almost like Uber employees are employees. You're like an employee, but you have none of the benefits of being an employee. Alright, yeah, he nevertheless claimed the gallery's only motivation in exhibiting a given artist was to fill the cash box of the house. Probably. Artists, too, were to be condemned for their lack of resistance to the market, for artists generally did not exhibit together out of mutual agreement over aesthetic ideals, but the response to market demands. He made the aristocrat basis of his criticism explicit when he condemned the cartoonist Willett for embracing mediocrity by virtue of his desire to achieve commercial success and official approval. Similarly, he claimed not only that the Cubists Glaze and Metzinger were the victims of theories that they do not understand thoroughly, but that the controversies their art elicited was no more than that an advertisement constructed following an exigency of the merchant. However, in contrast to Lecouz-Duthre, Alt was prepared to see some merit in the Cubist style and to propose his own aesthetic as an alternative to the pitfalls of commercialized painting. I can agree with Alt a little more than Duthre here, just because Duthre seems a little close-minded on the progress of art. Thus, even though I agree with a great deal of what he is saying, thus much of his critical energy was devoted to promoting his painterly techniques, known as haute couleur, as an alternative to oil painting. Echoing the earlier criticism of such conservatives as Charles Blanc, Alt claimed that oil painting on canvas, by virtue of fragility of the medium and its small-scale format, was designed for individual contemplation in the home and thus catered for the commercial market. Alt color, on the other hand, was modeled after fresco techniques and therefore tailor-made for large-scale mural decorations of the civic sort. Let's look at some of Alt's work. Okay. Blue Grotto and Capri. can see how it's. I mean, this still seems close to more traditional naturalist painting styles. Actually, it's very naturalist. I'm a little confused how he's innovating whatsoever. Yeah, these are just very naturalist landscapes. They're a little like desaturated, so they're almost like more naturalist than most that I'd expect. They're remarkable, like some of them are remarkably naturalist. That's gorgeous, in just its veracity. Ugh. Well, huh. In his criticism for the action to art, Alt repeatedly disparaged oil painting and I'm gonna have to look up that word. Eulogized. Praise highly. Okay. Eulogized the decorative large-scale frescoes of Michelangelo's Sistine ceiling. According to Alt, it was through the decorative concept alone that an artist could achieve the heroic aspirations of their aristocrat. Man, I am filled with so many I cannot agree, and yet I agree with statements with these old artists. Like, I'm a little confused looking at his art, what he means by that, or what he means by his earlier points, because it sure seems like he's just trying to do pretty basic naturalism. The plastic elements of a work should be the manifestations of peculiar consciousness of the artist. Furthermore, it is necessary to go beyond bourgeoisie. I'm gonna say that word correctly forever. I will try. Where was I? Beyond bourgeoisie, how do I say that? Ecclesiastical. I think that's what it is. Ecclesiastical or official action. Social actions say it all if one wants to arrive at the concentration of all force of thought, of all will and knowledge in a work of beauty. Aristocrat art was beautiful by virtue of its utter individuality and complete separation from anything construed as social. So he's arguing against anything that's... I guess that makes sense that he'd be arguing against the social. Ugh. But that was sure not what it seemed like it was meaning. It is the integral action of the self that endangers true art, and art. This type will homogenize lines, color, and volumes of decoration with the structure of an edifice or with the dimensions of great idea. The epic idea of the aristocrat thus produces a decorative rhythm that can even give an easel painting the volumetric force of a wall fresco. It is this volumetric quality that Alt found admirable in the work of the cubist Albert Glaze. Let's just look at Albert Glaze. Albert Glaze. I mean, that's kind of neat. Why is he praising this guy if his stuff... Or why if he finds this type of cubist work so interesting, why is all of his stuff just plain old naturalism? I like that one. Oh my goodness, he's got like theoretical layouts for this stuff. Okay. Alright. Alt Glaze, football player, figure 2 for his praise because the players seem to move in a space simultaneously more ample and more in-depth than the opposed planes constituted. Figures reportedly produce a more intense sensation indicative of a spatial magnitude. Presumably Alt thought the transparent planes and cubic forms that serve diffused together the painting's imagery and amplified its pictorial impact beyond that usually achieved in the easel painting format. Indeed, paintings such as Metzinger's Harbor, let's look at Metzinger too. There is something very pretty about that. Wow, I love the like impressionist pointillism here. Very colorful. Ooh, even more colorful. That's just almost mosaic. I could see the criticism though that I mean, I understand the criticism that something like this is a little shallow, potentially, but considering it was brand new, I think it's valid in its technical exploration of the arts. Create a scene of amplitude. Okay, views defined by Euclidean perspective and even captured the curvature of the Earth's surface. This epic space had an aristocratic equivalent in art of Alt, who in images... Did I look at the wrong artist? Because Alt stuff... I don't see how Alt stuff looks anything like this, or is even reminiscent of it. Alright, he emulated the curvilinear reanimation of Riemannian space created by Metzinger in his earlier landscapes, although he did not combine multiple views in a single painting or structure space through Caesian passage. Alt did enjoy mild spatial distortion to augment our sense of spatial recession and volumetric depth. Thus, the roadside walls separating two fields in the foreground of Alt's painting diverge dramatically as they approach us, as if we were viewing the landscape through a fish-eyed lens. This dramatic curvature has its parallel in the curvilinear lines surrounding the sun, which gives the sky a volumetric quality suitable to the panorama spread out below. Together, Earth and sky produce a synthesis experience of sublime luminous silence, although the cubist failed to realize the matte finish, gritty or hard surface achievable through. Oh, and here we get the... That's Glaze. Alright, yep. Football player. Gene Metzinger. Why didn't they include any pictures of alt stuff? Because I'm still not sure I looked at the right Jacob Alt. Alright. Alt color. The Mexican aristocrat thought their spatial innovations adaptable to his own intentions and thus worthy of praise. Clearly, Alt's objection to the Cubists had less to do with their techniques than with their intentions, which he called to market forces rather than aristocratic aspiration. When he did criticize Cubist techniques, it was from a standpoint of the commercial implications of their chosen medium, although both the aristocrat and the Cubists hoped to transform the consciousness of their audience. Alt felt alone in wanting to revolutionize the artistic medium by abandoning oil on canvas, by creating a new technique adaptable to other contexts. He hoped to reach an audience beyond that which would attend an art exhibition as an aristocrat. Alt hoped to divorce art from the commercialized format of oil on canvas, and in so doing arrive at a technique amendable to only to self-expression. In short, the political aspirations that led Alt to condemn oil on canvas were not unlike those that inspired Picasso to invent collage for both artists, abandoned easel painting and traditional medium as a form of protest against state-sanctioned academianism. Academianism? Yeah, academianism. Thus far, I have focused on the aristocrats' critique of the private gallery system for which corrupting effects on the Cubist movement. Now I will analyze those exhibition spaces by identified as free-form commercialism, as I previously noted. Lacruz, Duthar, Alt, and their aristocratic colleagues all concurred that the true artist is one who spurns commercial or state-sanctioned enterprises in order to follow the dictates of self-expression defined for Kalmar in terms of Bergsonian institution. Aristocrats were instructed to avoid public salons or art galleries and seek on non-commercial venues in which they exhibit their work. Not surprisingly, the Campagnons provided a form of such activity in the guise of various non-profit and strictly voluntary art organizations as early as March, and the journal announced the formation of an art guild, Les Forgersons, whose stated purpose was the evaluation of people through art and making art produced by the guilds. Man, why don't we have an art guild today? An art guild sounds dope. We have like a fancy crest that we could, like, I don't know, cast in like bronze or something. We could have like bronze art guild pens. Membership available for public viewing. The aristocrats facilitated those. I'm just wondering. Murillo. Okay. I feel like this article is starting to kind of like loop in on itself, so I'm gonna like quick skim to see if there's actually any more like points made. The joint declaration action to art group called anarchists to execute individual. Okay, yeah. Communication ideal propagated by anarcho-communist arguments for the formation of communes to meet the material needs of comrades and according. I mean, yeah, communes good, anarcho-communism good. Thus, individuals in a commune are condemned to suffer in the company of individuals whom they do not like, or for the sole well of being of the cause for the. That's just a silly. That's just silly. This is kind of like a really mischaracterization. You don't have allegiance to the commune. You help out your like community because like they help you out, and it's what you do. You take care of each other. Like, if you, in a commune, if you actually hated everyone in your commune, you leave. Oh, it's gonna break down. Okay, futurist aristocracy is probably just like violent people. Yeah, okay. I don't. Um, maybe I've gotten everything that I. Okay, we'll glance at the conclusion. Uh, in the sum, the union of modernists and anarchists under the banner of an aristocrat or aristocrat is a testament to what Matisse has left ongoing transferal of the radical critique of social reform to the domain of artistic forms. This conjuring of political and artistic avant-gardism effectively undermines Rentino Paglilo's claim that the divorce of the political and artistic avant-garde took place during the 1880s, or Peter Berger's assertion that the wartime rise of Dada alone redesignated the merger of political and aesthetic. Why didn't we talk about Dada in relation to the stuff earlier? Like, that actually would have had good relation in the lead-up. Okay. The involvement of futurists and cubists in their artistic movement attests to the ongoing politicization of aesthetic avant-gardism throughout the period before the appearance of Zurich Dada in 1916. Giannacio's alignment of the futurist aesthetic with aristocratic theory, Alt's adaptation of Cubist space to his decorative program, or Kalmar's anarchist reading of Cubist innovation, point to the ongoing dialogue between anarchists and Parisian modernists over the theories of vanguardism and the political import of aestheticism, while the aristocrats concurred that the vanguardism signaled by the stylistic innovation was conductive to their own departure from accepted social norms. Lecouz-Duthar and Alt felt aesthetic novelty in and of itself was not sufficient. The attraction of the action to art movement for artists such as Cervini and Gianniasato reside in the fact that both the futurist and the aristocratic shared the same epistemological assumption that served to separate them were their differing conceptions of how those assumptions related to market forces. For Kalmaner, an artist's allegiance to Bergsonian individualism alone was enough to determine his anarchist convictions. For Lecouz-Duthar or Alt, an artist's involvement in the commercial market determined whether self-professed ideals were sincere or merely self-serving. Artists like Cervini or Giussiato inhabited a mild ground, finding compatibility between their Bergsonian... Oh my god, is this all the conclusion? Bruh. Simplify your conclusion. Your conclusion should be like a paragraph. Maybe I'm missing things because this isn't a chapter excerpt, so the conclusion has a lot of things that are kind of like out of context. I think there's some interesting things here. I think a lot of the context of it is I think there's a lot of missing context in the discussion though, because it is very much in the lens of like early French political discourse around art specifically. So it's a lot of interesting things there, but I'm not totally sure that isn't as interesting to the modern discussion of things as I would have liked. I think that'll be it for today's stream. Tomorrow I will probably do a digital painting stream, and if anyone's interested, probably at the end of 3 to 5 hours of painting, just have some fun playing some video games. Just because I don't know why, but I haven't played any video games in a while, and I feel like I want to. So, thanks to anyone who participated in my kind of archaic reading and participated in chat. It's always appreciated. It always makes engagement a little easier. Very fun listening to like the Si Ciao or Ciao Beo or whatever was the Italian resistance song. That was cool. And I love readings like this to modern protest action because I have a great interest in it. So, to anyone who watched, have a great rest of the day, and I hope your Christmases were great. Thanks for watching.